What if the most lethal weapon in military history wasn't a bomb, a sword, or an army, but a single, terrifying concept inside the human mind? In the brutal sun of the late 11th century, high above the jagged peaks of the Olborz Mountains, a stone fortress seemed to grow directly out of the mountain itself. This was Alamut, the eagle's nest. To the world, it was an impregnable citadel. To the mighty Seljuk Empire, a global superpower ruling from China to the Mediterranean, it was a dangerous rebel threat. But to the grandmaster who commanded it, Hassan-i Sabbah, it was the birthplace of the world's first elite shadow network, the Hashashin, the Assassins. They were ghosts who could bypass entire Imperial Guard divisions with a single blade. But their terrifying legacy was truly forged on one fateful morning. A morning where history was rewritten not by a murder, but by a demonstration of absolute, spine-chilling loyalty that made empires crumble without a single arrow being fired. The Seljuk Sultan, Malik-Shah I, had finally had enough of Hassan's defiance. To the empire, Hassan was a radical destabilizing the entire region. Determined to wipe Alamut off the map, the Sultan dispatched his fiercest general, Emir Ahmad Sanjar, alongside a massive conventional army of 10,000 heavily armored cavalrymen, veteran shock troops, and elite archers. They marched across the dusty Persian plains, their steel armor gleaming under the harsh sun, completely confident that no stronghold could survive their numbers. Arriving at the mountain, they deployed a massive, suffocating siege camp around the base of the cliffs. They coiled around Alamut like an iron serpent, cutting off every supply line, blocking water, and closing the paths. The plan was simple: starve them out, breach the gates, and put everyone to the sword. Yet thousands of feet above the chaotic, noisy war machine below, the atmosphere inside Alamut was unsettlingly silent. Hassan-i Sabbah stood quietly in his stone study, surrounded by rare manuscripts, star charts, and maps of empires. Hassan was no ordinary warlord. He was a brilliant polymath, a master strategist, and a psychological genius who knew that fear was far more efficient than steel. Looking out his narrow arched window at the rising smoke of 10,000 imperial soldiers, he didn't blink. Conventional rulers commanded bodies through coin and fear. Hassan commanded the very souls of his men. To end the standoff, a proud Seljuk envoy dressed in extravagant silks climbed the treacherous mountain path under a flag of truce. Escorted into the austere council chamber, the envoy stood before Hassan, radiating imperial arrogance. He delivered a brutal, uncompromising ultimatum from the Sultan. Surrender the keys to the castle, disband your fanatics, and bow to the throne, or watch this fortress be torn down stone by stone. Hassan listened to the aggressive threats with a serene, knowing smile. His absolute calmness completely unnerved the imperial messenger. Instead of arguing or begging for peace, Hassan slowly stood up and invited the envoy to the high, wind-swept ramparts. Below them was a terrifying, sheer vertical drop into a jagged, rocky canyon. Standing like stone statues along the edge were young guards in plain white tunics. These were the Fidai, disciples who had undergone years of intense physical training and psychological conditioning. Their faces showed zero fear, zero anxiety. Hassan turned to the first youth and gave a quiet, low command: "Kill yourself." The words barely hung in the air before the young guard, without a second thought, without a single blink, stepped onto the narrow ledge. He drew a razor-sharp dagger, plunged it deep into his own chest, and fell backward into the open abyss. The envoy gasped in absolute horror, rushing to the edge, watching the white tunic spin down the massive vertical cliff until it disappeared into the dark shadows of the valley below. Before the envoy's mind could even process the horror, Hassan turned to a second youth and commanded, "Leap!" The second disciple didn't hesitate. He didn't even look down at his fallen brother. He took 3 fast, athletic strides and launched himself directly off the stone parapet into the empty sky, arms spread wide like an eagle riding the mountain wind, diving straight toward his death with absolute serenity. The Seljuk envoy stumbled backward onto the stone floor, his face pale, his hands shaking violently. He had brought a threat of physical destruction, but he had just been hit with total psychological annihilation. Hassan walked up to the trembling man, his voice low, steady, and chilling. "Go back to your master. Tell him I command 60,000 men who obey me just like this. Your sultan rules over bodies. I rule over souls. Lift this siege now, or my men will visit him in his own bedchamber." The terrified envoy fled, dropping his scrolls, and practically threw himself down the mountain path. He burst into General Sanjar's grand tent, shaking uncontrollably as he explained that these men didn't fear death, they craved it as a sacred honor. The general realized the tactical nightmare. You cannot fight, bribe, or intimidate an enemy that actively wants to die for their cause. Within days, the massive Seljuk army packed up their tents under the cover of night and retreated, terrified of the invisible vengeance of the eagle's nest. Hassan's demonstration changed warfare forever. The assassins knew they couldn't beat empires in open fields, so they perfected asymmetric warfare, decapitating the enemy's leadership with surgical precision. This was proven months later in October 1092, when a young assassin disguised as a poor Sufi mystic bypassed an elite security detail and assassinated the empire's powerful Grand Vizier, Nizam al-Mulk, with a single blow. When the European crusaders arrived in the region shortly after, they encountered this terrifying shadow network and brought the word assassin back to the West, cementing it forever into human history. The whispering walls of Alamut proved that the ultimate weapon isn't forged in fire. It is engineered entirely inside the mind. And when men fight with that level of absolute devotion, they become completely invincible.